This is an excerpt from Master of Shadows. A lot of the book is taken up with a chase. The main character, John Grant, is being pursued, and this is effectively where the chase begins. The night was a warm one, but still as a tomb, as if the universe itself waited, breath bated, to see what might happen next. He slowly turned his head until he could make out the shape of Badr Khasan, a seated silhouette a shade darker even than the night, leaning against a solitary tree some little way from where John Grant lay close by his mother. He looked at her next, curled into an S and with her back to him. There was no way of telling if sleep eluded her too, but she seemed peaceful. Badr had forced them onwards, southwards for hours, long after darkness fell. He had allowed them mere minutes back at the cottage to gather together a few belongings, clothes, some food, before selecting a garron for each of them from among those of the dead troopers. The rest of the beasts he had driven away, with shouts and claps and a slap to the hindquarters of the one nearest. The animals had scattered, together with the remnants of the life John Grant had known before the coming of the Moor. Khasan had almost thrown him into his mount's saddle before being slightly gentler with his mother. For many hours thereafter they had kept up a punishing pace, a ride made all the harder by the big man's insistence on staying far away from any roads or even trackways. "They will be after us soon enough," he said as they started out. "Distance from this place must be our only friend now, the more miles the better." He had led them into the high country then, from where it was possible to see in all directions, and so ensure that they kept away from any who might observe their flight and speak of it to others. "The fewer folk catch sight of us for the first few days, the better it will be for us," he said. John Grant had nodded his assent to whatever Badr said. Jessie, however, devoted all her efforts to watching the landscape around them. Her expression seemed as desolate as the hills they passed over, and since leaving their home she had remained all but silent. It was while John Grant was a little way ahead and just out of earshot that Badr took the opportunity to speak to Jessie. "I know about the boy," he said. Jessie kept her eyes on the track ahead. "What about him?" she asked. "I was close to Patrick," he said, "for many years. We talked together and I knew him well." It was no answer to her question, but Jessie guessed at his meaning just the same. "He's all I have," she said. "And you are all he has, I know," said Badr. "I wish only to tell you that I will do all I can for you both. I had hoped to find you well. If I'm honest, I had thought you might be better looked after." "By another man, you mean?" She did not ask the question harshly. If anything, there was a smile in her voice for the first time. "I think not." She turned to look at Badr, and he felt sudden embarrassment and turned away. "I had not expected to find you both in danger," he said. "And now it's clear that my presence here and my actions have done more harm than good. I came only to see that you were safe and well, as Patrick had hoped, and I've brought trouble with me instead." Jessie nodded. "We have been alone until now," she said. "Jardine and his men have hung over us like a shadow all the while. Trouble of one sort or another would have come our way eventually. I'm glad you're here, to share it." He stole a glance at her profile and saw the proud set of her jaw. "I must tell you that I had not prepared a rescue mission," he said. "Beyond finding shelter tonight and putting more distance between us and Jardine tomorrow, I have no plan." Jessie Grant said no more, and instead kicked her horse into a trot that put her alongside her son. The sky was cloudless, and the moon, not quite full, seemed to shrug one hunched shoulder at them. The long dusk of summer had given time for their eyes to adjust to the fading of the day, and now a million stars added lustre to the curtain of night. As they dropped down below a ridge of high ground and onto a wide terrace, the way ahead had seemed blocked by huge figures. Badr had pulled up his great black warhorse in alarm, and while his eyes struggled to make sense of the scene before them, it had been John Grant who was first to recognise the ambush for what it was, a circle of standing stones. The push would have told him if there was life up here, and it had not done so. "I've seen the like of this before," said Badr, after John Grant had explained. "Stones stood on end by the ancients for some or other magical purpose, or so I was told. My father said the people who lived here before us felt the need to track the journeys of the stars and also of the sun and the moon," said John Grant. "Astronomers," murmured Badr, nodding. Said John Grant, failing to catch the whole of the word. "Astronomers," said Badr carefully. "Astronomy is the study of the arrangement of the stars." He looked at the boy then, searching his face for understanding and finding none. "These are Greek words," he said. "Greeks?" asked John Grant. At least this time he had been able to repeat the word the Moor had spoken. Having saved your skin, now I must save your soul, I see, said Badr. Your education begins now. It will pass the time for both of us. Badr had had them settle by the stones, almost in their shadows. It would be as good a place as any to pass the night, he said, and perhaps the spirits of the ancients would watch over them through the remaining hours of darkness. Though he said nothing, John Grant was pleased by the choice of campsite. He knew, even if the Moor did not, that standing stones like these were regarded with suspicion by most folk hereabouts. It was said they had witnessed wickedness long ago, scenes of human sacrifice and witchcraft and the like, and none but the brave and the foolhardy risked spending time among them. They would be safe, he thought. Lying in the darkness, his thoughts whirling like a djinn, he stretched his arms out beyond the edge of his blanket until he could place his hands, palm downwards, on the cool grass. He spread his fingers and waited. There it was, the rumbling vibration of the spinning of the world. He could hear it too, deeper than the deepest bass note beneath the rise and fall of his own breathing and the beating of his heart, like wind in distant treetops. It was a comfort, a reminder that far beneath his cares the world was turning, spinning forwards into the dark, as it should and always would. He let go and gave himself up entirely to the fall towards the stars, a movement so enveloping and so vast that all other considerations were swept away like dead leaves.